Let's take a close look on what's happening here on the workflow for provisioning that other VM. So that workflow is running, and you're going to see that because it's a much smaller VM from VM image perspective, that's going to execute faster than the Windows 2008. I'm on the phase of creating a VM from template again. Right click on it. You're gonna see that we are now querying the adapter, configuring the network adapter, and that should be executing. So I've done that. There's pretty much no customization to happen because there is really no OS as part of that VM. If we're gonna come back here, you're gonna see that the whole workflow has executed successfully. Okay. But what I'd like to spend some time here is showing you that with Tidal Enterprise Orchestrator, it's extremely simple to create those workflows. It's like a visual diagram where you drag and drop. So let's say, for example, let's deep dive here on that sub workflow, which says, for example, create a VM from template. Right click that and let's gonna edit that particular workflow. So it says create a VM from cloning, doing several steps here. Let's say that you decide that after customizing a VM, you want, for example, to add an extra step, which is make sure that VM is running the latest VMware tools. So if I expand here on my left hand side, I have all the adapters that Tidal has, and one of those adapters, it's under VMware, it's, has a lot of functionalities here. One of them is upgrade VM tools. So if I drag and drop it here, I can add that step at anywhere on my workflow. Anywhere, obviously, that makes sense. But I'm saying it's how easy it is to add an extra step. And likewise, the same way I've added that step here, we are hearing from our customers that they are now capable of building those workflows that used to take weeks and months, really, taking a lot less time, okay? Because it is extremely simple. So I'm not going to save here. If I come here on the portal, Rob, refresh that, his server has now been provisioned. That's the blank server. So let me go back here to the slides. Now what I'd like to do is I would like to modify that virtual server. Let's say that the user wants to add, for example, more CPUs to that previously provisioned virtual server. Again, he goes on the portal. He now is going to select the server that he has previously created. He's going to modify the CPU allocation. That, from the user perspective, he waits a few minutes, and that's it. That's completed. Behind the scenes, what's happening, again, just invoking a workflow on Tidal Enterprise Orchestrator, which is, for example, in that case, it's doing things like powering off the VM, reconfiguring the CPU, and then powering the VM on. So let's go ahead and do that step. So if I'm back here on the portal as Rob, and he comes under service items, what you're going to see is I now have that VM that I created, that blank VM, CL 2011B, which, by the way, he comes here into the service item details, and he can see, the number of CPU, one CPU, the amount of memory. He has all the information here. Let's say that he wants to add more CPU to that particular VM. So he's going to come here, order. That comes already pre-populated, the name of the VM. Let's say he wants to go from 1 to 4 virtual CPUs. On that case, for modifying number of CPUs, we do not have the need for approval. That's just the way the lab is configured, right? So you can see that we going execute is in progress, to modify the number of CPUs. And if we would come here into the Tidal orchestrator, you're going to see that we're effectively invoking a new workflow. Observe that. You're going to see that workflow running, which shut down the guest, powering off the VM, powering on the VM again, and completed. So it's a pretty fast workflow. But if you look here into the vCenter itself, you're going to see what has happened, right? As I showed on the workflow, powered off the VM, reconfigured it, and then powered on the VM again. And if I would click here on that VM, look on the summary, you're going to see that I now have 4 virtual CPUs, which is also confirmed here. If Rob comes here and he looks up, for the status of his request is now completed. He comes here on service items. He wants to look about the details of his VM. He has 4 virtual CPUs. Okay? Last step that I want to show you here is, let's say that Rob, he now wants to deprovision a server before that expiry date that he set when he was actually creating the VM. The reason why a user would want to do that, because if you charging, for the number of days that a VM is active and he doesn't need that anymore, he can obviously save some money. So pretty straightforward. He's going to go on the portal, select the VM that he previously created, select that for being deprovisioned. Again, from his perspective, he waits a few minutes. The server is now gone. It's deprovisioned, and obviously, he's happy because he's saving some money. In the background, what's happening is Tidal orchestrator is processing that request, execution workflow for deprovisioning a VM, which in that case is going to involve powering off the VM, deleting that. Other things that could happen as well, it's, for example, update your billing system, right? I can go and notify a billing system to say that VM is no longer used, so stops charging for that. So it's going to go ahead here and do that. So I'm logging in as Rob again, selecting my VM, and I'm looking into the different services that I can do here, or different options related with that particular VM. One of them is deprovisioning. If I order that, it's all pre-populated. What I can do here is submit the order. Again, this is invoking a workflow on Tidal, which says deprovisioning a VM. If I take a look on that, what's really going on here, I'm getting that I'm calling a sub workflow which says deprovision the VM. If I expand that, I've first powered off the VM and now deleting that. Which, if I come here on vCenter, I can see that exactly happening. I'm first powering off the VM and now I'm deleting that. Which, if I come back here to my workflow, I deleted the VM, then released the IP address. I released the IP address the VM was using, and I returned that back to the pool. So if we come here back to Rob's perspective, that VM deprovision is now completed. So what I'd like to do now here is, let's see what's the status of that VM that Rob had requested, the Windows, basically the Windows 2008. If you remember, we had requested at first place. That's apparently it is now completed. So what Rob has here under his service that he has requested, he has on the virtual machine, he has a Cisco Live 2008. If I come here into the details of that, I can see it's a Windows 2008 Enterprise, 1 CPU and 2 gig of memory, right? That was all provisioned. If I would come here on VMware vCenter and look here, I'm going to see the same thing, 1 CPU, 2 gigs of memory. Say that I want to open the console here just to show you that that VM has actually been provisioned successfully. So here we have a Windows 2008 successfully provisioned. And here I have a Windows 2008 that was successfully provisioned, and that also has network connectivity. If you look here, I'm just going to go ahead and try to ping my default gateway, and you see that I do have network connectivity. And again, if Rob wanted, he could come here and, you know, modify the CPU allocation, deprovision that VM, and so on. So that concludes the third demonstration that I was going to demonstrate to you earlier on today. So just to give you information, just for your information. So as I said earlier on, the problem that we had, where you saw here when I was doing earlier today, when I couldn't provision a new VM or even modify that, actually what happened is my IP address pool actually exhausted. So someone actually had a question about it, you know, how do we handle failures here? And you can see that we have the error message here, and not only here, but on the new scale on the portal itself, the user also, you know, got an error message, which was what we saw earlier on today. But I have, you know, released the IP address, and you know that was the only change that I did, and you saw that I have just completed demonstration to you where we provision, we modified a VM, and we deprovision that. So that concludes the third demonstration, and I'm gonna be sending out an email to you with that video. Thank you.